welcome all. Today's colloquium is for a slightly different format with a panel discussion guided by Andy Revkin. Andy has written on global warming and Arctic change for decades, mostly for the New York Times. And Andy is now directs the new Earth Institute initiative on communication and sustainability. And without any further ado, I will turn the screen over to Andy now.
Thanks, Ajit, and thanks everybody for being here today. This is a spectacular opportunity to share insights and build awareness of methods that I think can be spread far from the Arctic. For generations, scientists and journalists going into the field to probe urgent issues had a common approach. I should know, I've been part of it, 3 decades of reporting. From the Amazon to the Arctic, we parachute in, get the lay of the land, do the data collection or the reporting, go back to the hotel room or the lab or the newsroom, assess the data, and write it up for audiences. And mostly the audiences were far from the issues on the ground. Then we'd go to the next study or story. I had that pattern in my own life for many years, and it's very exciting to now be at Lamont at the Earth Institute at Columbia and learning about the work with this community in the Arctic to see if there's another path. The reason there should be another path is that for science and journalism, that old approach could build mistrust and pushback. It missed enormous opportunities and responsibilities. What are we not learning from informal sources of wisdom? What questions are we missing? And most important, what are we doing to help communities with the greatest vulnerability, the deepest history of neglect and abuse, and the fewest resources? Luckily, this pattern is changing, as you'll learn today in this special Lamont-Doherty Colloquium on a pioneering research effort with 2 names, Ikaagvik Sikukun in Inupiat, or Ice Bridges. With generous support from the Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation, the goal is to refine understanding of consequential Arctic ocean and sea changes and ice changes by meshing technology and tradition, drones and wet boots, the scientific method, and indigenous insights. Today, you'll hear from Mr. Bobby Schaefer, an elder in the village of Kotzebue on the west shore of Alaska, over near where it faces off toward what we call Russia in the modern world. And this is all, it has indigenous names, of course. Mr. Alex Whiting, the environmental director of the native village of Kotzebue. Dr. Chris Zappa is the principal investigator on the project from Lamont-Doherty Earth Observatory, oceanographer. And Dr. Andy Mahoney of the University of Alaska Fairbanks, the co-PI. Thank you, panelists, for participating, and for guests, of course, for coming and listening and weighing in. You'll be able to comment both in the chat box and those watching on YouTube can ask questions there, and those in the video section can raise your hand toward the end. Don't waste the opportunity to connect live with folks out on the front lines in the Arctic. First, we're going to watch a short video portrait of ice bridges filmed by the Alaskan-based filmmaker Sarah Betcher. Then you'll hear from the panel. Then we'll hear from you in the audience, as I said. I want to offer a quick acknowledgement, especially important in considering indigenous issues wherever they are. I acknowledge the traditional, ancestral, unceded territory of the Lenape people here where I live up the Hudson River Valley, about 50 miles north of Columbia. And the same goes for Columbia's campuses to the south along the river that flows both ways, as the indigenous peoples of this terrain used to call the Hudson River. The issues and opportunities being explored in the Arctic have resonance right here at home. So hold on a second while I pull up that clip to get things going with some a view from the scene. Hold on 1 second here. It's that classic Zoom moment. Share sound, desktop 1. Here we go. Oops, sorry. We'll get there.
Ikaagvik Sikukun, in your pack for ice bridges.
Bobby Schaefer.
Cyrus Harris, systolic resident.
Roswell L. Schaefer Sr.
I'm John Goodwin.
My name is Christopher Zappa.
Ajit Subramaniam.
Nathan Loxog.
Carson. Taz DeCall.
I'm Andy Mahoney.
Sana Hauser. Kate Turner.
Hi, my name is Sarah Betcher.
Alex Whiting.
My name's Corey.
Scott.
Sean Culbertson.
Aaron Farber.
Jesse Lindsay.
Peter Bovang.
An important facet of the project has always been to have a legacy, how to do this co-production of knowledge where it starts in the community and we work together throughout the project from the beginning.
Everyone was on an equal plane and we're all creating it together at the same time, and it's really exciting to be a part of a project like this.
We came and found the biggest whiteboard that we could find in Kotzebue Sound, so that we could try and visualize what came up from talking with elders yesterday, as we took our first attempt to try and understand what the important questions are that locals here living in Kotzebue have about the sea ice.
Hopefully you feel like we so far are at least capturing what you've told us the other day and are listening.
We felt that we found 5 or 6 interrelated questions emerge out of the discussion.
It's really fascinating.
Atogurut tingmi ragat laromik pa ngashin siku nepekdo laship lugo ukolu ugrut sisotlo.
It's always really cool when we see a breathing hole, see the marks of how they
chew that.
Marks.
They chew that.
It's October and we're back in Kotzebue at the waterfront with a whole bunch of spotted seals behind us.
Isumak saktoneksut kanok silyam angalatchisonakpa ang woranik suvaluk uko ugrut mani kekektagrungmi. Uko ilisamakshong naksut unnin eletchorishong nagat kanok itilanga sikulekipman mani kekektagrungmi.
How does the ice move depending on the different forcings? When the winds come from the west, how does the ice move? When the winds come from the east, how does the ice move? So we want to place our instrumentation in various locations around the sound to capture these events throughout the winter and in the spring when we come here with the UAVs.
Well, that gives a bit of a picture. Folks can watch that on YouTube as well. So there's a few more minutes, and I encourage everyone to check it out. Just search for this Ice Bridges project, and you'll find it. It's a fantastic project. Again, I've reported on tons of scientific initiatives around the world, and it is still the norm, I think, to see that other pattern we were talking about earlier, where you just go in and do the work. There's not a lot of community engagement. And even in Peru, in the Himalayas, there was a recent incident that was written about on the Columbia blog, where the scientific instrumentation was appropriated by the local community. They thought there was a mining project involved. They were actually drilling into the ice. So these issues are really consequential on both sides. I thought it would be great to start first here with our wonderful guests from up in Kotzebue, and Bobby as the elder statesman, probably the older person here among us. If you could offer some reflections on how this has played out from your standpoint. When was the first time you saw someone from this team, and just give us your sense of what has been missing that might be happening differently now. And Bobby, thanks. The floor is yours if you are on there.
Bobby, you're muted right now. Can you unmute yourself?
If there's any issue, we can start with Alex too.
Yeah, hi.
Up.
He's on. Hello, can you hear me now?
Yeah, we do. Yep.
Okay. Well, thanks for inviting me to this thing. I just wanted to say that the last 4 years have been quite strange with the leadership we had or lack of leadership we had in our government. But I sort of stalled everything that we thought because every step, the way that we put one foot forward and then hope like heck we can continue it. But but not only that, we had the COVID, that virus that's still with us and probably will remain with us for a while. And it's probably in the forefront of everybody's minds because they're so fearful of it. I've lost some good neighbors and some good friends during this time, and it was very hard. But anyway, I just wanted to say that the local knowledge is something that's been missing in most of the studies, and I think there are other federal agencies up here that had a tough time trying to add us into the equation, and because they got the degrees, they got the expertise, and all we have are local what we do out there in the country, But I wanted to say that I think this project was kind of interesting because not only did I get to see what we do as Inupiaq, to go out and harvest animals and see what the animals do, where they live, but we also got to see for the first time some of the scientific methods that were used to study some of the ice conditions, the animals and what they do, and so that was kind of strange to us as elders, and but it was. Let me tell you, it's kind of opened an eye for us in looking at it from a scientific perspective. That was something that we never understood. But anyway, it was kind of an eye opener for all of us, that the elders that were participating in this thing. Historically, before the white man came and before there was changes in the way we did things, we always noticed things. Our language wasn't written, so everything was passed down by the word of mouth. And it's been like that for thousands of years, so we're very good at it. And although it wasn't written, we had the specific people in our tribe that never forgot things. And I'll give you an example. When we had a hunting crew go out and say hunted beluga, everything was organized right down to a letter. And they went out and they recalled the dates of a specific time when they went out. They looked at the conditions of the ice, the conditions of the environment. When we got the animal, they looked at the animal health. So basically, you had the weather on top of that, because they remembered from next year to the next year after year what the weather was like and why. If there was changes, they would note them. But that was just the way we looked at things, and we never knew that we're looking at it scientifically. But in our sense, I guess that's what we were doing. But the animal health was very important from year to year. Those are the considerations that we had. So we became pretty good observers of our environment, and that's what kept us alive for thousands of years.
Right.
But of course, when things started changing, when the missionaries came up here and the miners and the whalers as well, things started changing. Our way of hunting started changing because we were introduced to metal, and so it was. There were slight changes in the way we looked at things, but of course the biggest changes came after when automation and came into being back in the 50s and 60s. The snowmobiles, outboard motors, everything changed, and so the old way of organizing every hunt and the gathering changed tremendously because of not only the missionaries come up here and telling us that you don't have to be in your path, you have to be a white man in order to succeed in the new world. And so they banned a lot of the cultural, spiritual activities. They told the kids that you can't speak that language no more, that you have to speak the English language. I can go on and on to that, my point is that we saw some tremendous changes, but we never forgot about the animal because we still had to survive regardless of the changes, the new methods of hunting with new weaponry and new modes of transportation and so forth. And so little did we know that was going to change to the worst. And I guess if we had a choice, we would have stayed with the old way, knowing that all the benefits of industrialization were in fact very harmful to our environment. My point, of course, is that being involved on what we consider the last stance to save mankind, so to speak, it is very serious, and we're taking this very seriously because we know the end result if we don't do something with it now. And I wanted to wait for Alex to go and chime in, but I wondered that maybe I should just go ahead and give you some of my concerns about the environment, about our animals, the health of our animals, the health of our environment, because of massive changes that have happened, since the 1960s. It's happened a lot before that. It was very gradual, but it speeded up tremendously after the 1960s and the 70s and until today. A massive erosion. I never thought nothing of it. Walking the beaches and watching all the erosion of the permafrost that's falling into the Kotzebue Sound, into the Kobuk Lake, and into the Chukchi Sea. And but we always thought it was like a gift from God because we were finding all kinds of animals coming out of the ice. But little did we know that there was a reason for this erosion. Little did we know that all that crap that we're spilling from the fresh ice melting was in fact methane gas going into the atmosphere. You couldn't see it. Because like I said at the beginning, we're very visual. We couldn't see it. We had no clue that there was some bad stuff going up in the air and into the atmosphere. We, of course, we found out about that a little later. But the massive changes and the waters that my dad always mentioned, he died when he was 91 in 2006, and I always mentioned the changes, the waters rising, and then talked about the health of the animal, because why are we getting seals that are dying? Is the blubber brown rather than trying to be pink like it should? Things of that nature that he always noticed as an APAC elder. And after a while, I started piecing it together as I got a little more immersed into hunting and on my own. And as he got older and he couldn't hunt no more. But the massive changes were all over. Why am I boating around here and the water is fluorescent green? Why is it 78 degrees out here when I was a child growing up in the 50s? It never was like that. Our average temperature was in the 50s, and during the summers, but now it's getting up there, and because of the heat, there are tremendous changes happening within the environment, with our waters. Why are our seabirds dying? And then the elders got together and we determined that the waters just are getting too hot, so all the feed fish that the birds were so dependent on for hundreds and hundreds of years could not stay alive if they stayed on the beaches but near the rookeries, because the water there on the rookeries was too hot. So they had to go out in the ocean 40, 50 miles out there to survive. So the poor birds had nothing to chew on, nothing to eat. And so they started dying, and we started observing them probably for the last 10 years. You ask some more why are our seals getting sick? That frequent the Kotzebue Sound, and when you're boating around and watching this fluorescent green stuff on top, not knowing that what the consequences of this stuff are.
Right.
Until the scientists scientific community came out and basically told us this stuff is dangerous. And then all of a sudden, you start to hear reports from the Fish and Game about the walruses dying because they're clam eaters. You know, the clams vacuum the bottom and vacuum all the algae when they're in shallow water, and then you know the poor clams develop some really horrible toxins that can kill an elephant. You know, and that's why many of the walruses were dying. So what I'm saying basically is that massive changes not only in the environment, but there's massive changes in the ecosystem, and there's massive changes in the health of the animals because they rely on the healthy environment, you know, to stay healthy. And then of course we eat them.
Right.
How healthy are we? You know. So, and this is just pretty much the beginning of what I see happening with not only the weather, but what's happening in the environment, what's happening to the animals, and how healthy they would be. I witnessed in 2014 massive die-out of salmon in the Notak and Coboq rivers where they go up and spawn. And that summer we had some elders come down to Kotzebue to cool off because it was 70 degrees in Kotzebue every day. But up the rivers it was 100 degrees Fahrenheit, and the waters got so hot that they couldn't support the life anymore. So the salmon. And people were wondering why there's so many salmon dying up in Notak. Why so many salmon dying up to Coboq? And they're full of eggs. They haven't reached their spawning grounds, but their spawning grounds were too hot. It just got too hot, and when you have that, you have the algae growth, and of course the algae eats up all that oxygen. That's what the Fish and Game was saying, telling us, and the salmon can't live in those conditions, so they all died. And I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of salmon that we lost. We're just lucky that we had a couple of storms that came in that were cold, and the waters cooled off for the last part of the run to survive. So that, you know, in 4 years we would have a return of healthy salmon.
Yeah.
But those are the things that changes that we're seeing because of excessive heat up here, and it's not getting any better. It probably won't get any better, but you know, because they're predicting, of course, the scientific community is predicting something that's even worse, and so the heat will continue, the permafrost will continue to melt, and I'm witnessing it. We're witnessing. We talk about it all the time with the elders, and now that we know that they emit some dangerous gases, not only carbon dioxide, but also probably the worst thing is the methane gas. That's probably 20 times more lethal than carbon dioxide for our atmosphere. But it's something that we know now, and it's something that we're concerned about now because we want to live on this planet a little longer too. You know. Anyway, I think that's sort of an abridged version of what I wanted to tell you all.
That's a very good start.
Pardon me?
That's a very good start. And now Alex can fill us in a little bit as well, the environmental director from the village there. And I can't wait to come up there some point and help learn a little bit about this and as a journalist and convey it to the wider world myself. So Alex, I remember the last time we were speaking with both of you, you were talking about the specific cost of sea ice variability with a lot of mortality offshore, a lot of actual physical risk to people that it's gotten harder to predict. But generally, you know, if you could give your own quick sense of what's happening with this project that's different than the way things have gone before when scientists come up there, and what your expectations are.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, thanks for that, Bobby. So a lot of the issues and concerns that Bobby points out is one of the reasons why we have an environmental program here at the tribe. And I came up here in 1988 by way of Sika. My wife, Sikra, grew up around here at camp, living off the land. And in 1997, I was hired to develop the Native Village of Kotzebue's environmental program. And the program is rooted in Inupiaq values. with the goal of effectively participating in the management of the resources and addressing the kind of questions that Bobby was bringing up. Those resources are the cultural, spiritual, and nutritional base of the Inupiaq people of Kotzebue. And the program achieves the goal of working towards management through increasing the capacity of the tribe and its citizens to carry out research. Historically, there was no research collaboration with the tribe, and tribal citizens rarely had a formal role in research, and their indigenous knowledge was considered anecdotal. And most of the field work did not utilize their technical expertise, and instead their role was for manual labor or as navigators. The environmental program addressed these deficiencies or began to through tribal adoption of a research ordinance. And this approach provides for tribal input at the early stages of proposal development, creating opportunity for relationship building between the tribe and researchers that crafts an approach that is responsive to the needs of all parties and is rooted in practical on-the-ground realities. That's one of the things that is one of the hardest parts is for researchers to understand what the practical on-the-ground realities are. Most importantly, this approach ensures the proper role of our people and accountability by researchers to commitments made set out in the projects. By collaborating as co-equals in research, we increase the understanding of our environment and our influence over decisions affecting the resources we depend on. By combining the science and experience, wisdom, and skill sets of our people with the researchers, we produce exponential results that are unattainable with any other method. The high level of participation by our citizens in program activities provides economic opportunities that complement their independent way of life and contributes to their personal growth. And most of the people that participate in our projects are self-employed through various means, mostly related to resources around here and art, which are still related to resources. It does this through utilizing their intimate familiarity with the environment to develop the research questions, and by applying their highly developed practical technical expertise, their ability to craft and mechanics stuff, to achieving fieldwork objectives, to problem solving. I guess they have a really high degree of problem solving that's developed by a lifestyle of living off the land. You have to problem solve continuously every day, basically. Additionally, through the participation of numerous graduate students from universities across the nation in our research, the program increases cross-cultural understanding, promotes the value of indigenous knowledge, and emphasizes the importance of addressing tribal priorities, which increases the likelihood that future research and management professionals, which most of these graduate students will go on to be, will work successfully with and for tribal communities. Part of our mission is to address the treatment of indigenous knowledge as anecdotal, something you mentioned early on, I think, especially as it relates to influencing policy, which involves our environment. We achieve this through integration of indigenous knowledge into the research findings, which then become part of the best available science once it's published. This co-produced science is then used to inform federal and state environmental review, mitigation, permitting, and policy decisions. So that helps solve the problem of the anecdotal nature of that indigenous knowledge. And beyond the policy applications and the limited journal article audience, the program makes sure that research results are turned into products that can be widely shared with our citizens and the broader public. This is through things like posters, web pages, newsletters, radio shows, videos, tribal council reports, classroom and live audience presentations, and similar representations. Presenting research results in a user-friendly, aesthetically pleasing, and entertaining when possible manner is always the goal of the program. The environment is of interest to all of our citizens of all ages, and maximizing the awareness of research efforts beyond the scientific community is an obvious need from our perspective. It both promotes environmental literacy while recruiting advocates for environmental protection. And it also demonstrates the commitment of the tribe to its ethical responsibilities in the use of public and private funds for research by maximizing accessibility of that research to the broader public. The high visibility and record of our success with this research approach has accelerated changing the paradigm of the role Indigenous people play in Alaska research and resource management policy, something you alluded to early in your comments. We're part of the solution to that. The programs research has mainly focused on Kotzebue Sound, on which our tribal citizens depend for 70% of their wild harvest. Basic research like documenting the various Kotzebue Sound trophic levels, the ecology and function of coastal lagoons, and movement and behavior of ice seals and selected fish species have comprised the majority of our past efforts. More recently, we have begun investigating emerging phenomenon like the rapidly changing ice regime and cyanobacteria blooms. The Akavik Cycloclume project, which we're discussing, we participated in from the beginning in partnership with Lamont and UAF and our local people. Was funded by the Moore Foundation and is a great example of putting all of the above into practice and has been very productive and successful endeavor. I appreciate the opportunity to talk about our program and to talk about the Akavik Cycloclume project. So, thank you.
Thank you. So it's great, again, to hear these insights from the ground. There's clearly a lot of concrete cooperative sort of collaboration evolving. And now we'll turn to the scientists to see what your learning curve is like. I do want to start with Chris Zappa, and just knowing how hard it is from the journalistic lens and even the science I've reported on in the field. How did you flip the script? How did it come around to start this approach? That would be a great starting place, and we can get into a couple more questions with Andy Mahoney as well.
Sure. Thank you, Andy, for this opportunity. Thanks everyone for joining us today to hear about from our advisors of elders at Native Village of Kotzebue and Alex about this project. I'd have to give a lot of credit to the Moore Foundation, who really, when you asked about flipping the script, they had the foresight and the vision to allow us to go into the community to set up and co-design these questions with an advisory council from the very beginning. So we developed the whole project in collaboration with our advisory council of elders, not just Bobby, Ross Schaefer, you saw in the video, Ross Schaefer, Cyrus Harris, and John Goodwin, as well as Bobby. I think that was a key point to how to flip the script. So we engaged early and often, and I think that's just a message that we should always remember if you want in working with local communities in not just Alaska but anywhere. Looking at societal impacts is important to engage with the community and listen, really.
And Andy Mahoney, you're at the University of Alaska Fairbanks, so you're kind of in situ, in vivo, more time, at least up in the general region. When you think about how this is unfolding, what are some lessons that have already been learned in this early stage? So is there sort of a guidebook that's evolving here that could be applied outside the Arctic?
Yeah, I think there is, and I think that's part of our vision. We recognized in some ways we're on something of a leading edge here, and so we're trying to do our best to document our overall approach so that we can leave some direction for others who are trying to do something similar. What Chris pointed out is that this is different from other projects that either of us have worked on. And one of the key parts of that is we were allowed to start a project without clearly defined hypotheses. For a funding agency, I think that's a bit of a bold step. And actually, as scientists, it's pretty exciting. Actually, starting a project without hypotheses laid out in front of you. Right. So a little bit jumping in the deep end, but I mean, I have to say our advisory council was there with us right from the beginning, and that's a key part of it. And another aspect to this, I really have to pass back to Alex Whiting. He was, we really couldn't have done this without his involvement. He provided the connections between the incoming, the visitors, the scientists from UAF and Columbia University and University of Washington, and the elders like Bobby. So having that middle person, Alex, I don't want to just describe you as a middle person. You're so much more than that, but you really played that essential role for us. And I think recognizing those people and the value they have to play is essential.
That's so interesting. Some of the most interesting people I've met at Columbia so far in my year and a half here have been people who have that intermediary job. Andrew Krushevitz, working in the Bay of Bengal between climate science and communities at risk on evacuation protocols or the like. It seems very familiar. And these seem to be jobs or tasks that are underappreciated. So maybe this work can actually help draw attention to people like Alex Whiting, the importance of investing in the people who are not necessarily the lead author on a paper, but who are really helping create that dynamic. Alex, feel free to dive in on this too, but Andy, I don't know if that feels valid
Andy.
or not.
Oh.
Yeah, I didn't hear Alex jumping in. So yeah, Andy, that's I think you hit the nail on the head there. I think we do need to recognize the Alexes of the world and the essential role they play, especially going forward, because I think this sort of integrative research is going to become more and more important.
And maybe, Chris, can you just give a snapshot of where you are right now in the project? Sort of like if it's a 12-chapter book, where are we? What chapter are we reading?
If it's a 12-chapter book, I would say we're halfway through, probably. There'll always be, well, we're at the point where we've completed our field seasons. We've been working with the advisory council in disseminating information and knowledge through newsletters and events like this, at conferences. We're also have been writing some papers, but I think the true evolution part of this project is the legacy. And as Andy pointed out, we don't just want this to end now. It's a paradigm for working with communities in general. And actually would like to point out or highlight a very important part of this project was the documenting every step of the way with, as you saw in that video, Sarah Betcher developing or filmmaking of the entire project. I mean, every single step we took, she was documenting via film and audio. And that's a vital source of knowledge moving forward, not just for this project, but also moving forward as well. Yeah, I'll leave it at that.
And by the way, that's another, historically, that's been undervalued, I think, documentation of the projects as they're unfolding. Quite often, it's a last minute thing, or even in a National Science Foundation grant, there's that broader outcomes language is sort of, everyone sort of knows it's there, but it's kind of a headache, as opposed to thinking about it organically as a fundamental part of the work. That's for either Andy or Chris.
Yeah, I think we've really valued Sarah's filmmaking. And I should add, Sarah has a deep connection with Kotzebue that extends beyond this project. And so Sarah was another essential person who provided that sort of boundary spanner approach. She was able to introduce us to people that we would not have been able to meet if we just parachuted in, to borrow your phrase from earlier, Andy,
yeah.
Into the community of Kotzebue.
Yeah, and I'll just reinforce that even as a journalist. When I wrote my book about the Amazon and the murder of Chico Mendes back in 1989, a rubber tapper who was murdered as cattle ranchers were moving into the forest. When I arrived there in Chapuri, the first thing the Union of Rubber Tappers did was set me down and say, are you just coming in here to tell our story and go home? And I said, no, I'm here for 3 months. So let's settle in for a while, get to know each other. And that soft part, just being in the community, understanding the dynamics, what are you missing, applies just as much to science, I'm sure. So let's hear a little bit more from Alex and Bobby, if we can. Is Bobby still on the line? I think he is. And then we have some questions. Folks, if you have a question and you're in the Zoom chat, you can raise your hand. A couple of people are trying to monitor that and the chat box. So we have more time here and more terrain to cover. So, but anyway, I wanted to circle back to Alex and to Bobby for your sense of, is there some fundamental change in Kotzebue as a result of this? Communities sometimes in areas like this get it almost becomes, I don't know, what's the word? It's like a science hub. There are slums I've been to in Nairobi, Kenya, for example, that are almost constantly someone's coming in and studying them, and they become kind of frustrated or resistant. And I don't know whether it sounds like it's changed. It's not like that there. So again, Alex or Bobby, I don't know if you can hear me and offer some thoughts.
Well, the main reason it's not like that here in Kotzebue is because of all I laid out about the environmental program. That was sort of our mission. The Kavik Sukukun project, like I said, is a great example, but for me anyways, it's just one of tens of projects that we've done over the years with the same approach. While it's unique for some, that's sort of that's the meat of what this program is about. And so it was really, it was easy in some ways, or I guess I could say that for this approach for me anyways, is because this is how we approach all research. And by having examples of this approach, I mean, not examples in the singular, but examples like by being advocate and engaging in this kind of research approach, again, that's how we help change the paradigm. A few people talked about the paradigm, and that's what we set out to do, is to change the paradigm. And we have had a lot of widespread visibility through there. But it really does take someone like myself to consistently engage in this manner, and over time especially, and to also create opportunities by having the initiative to find partners to help answer the questions that we have here and stuff. And so it is helpful to have that liaison role that we talked about, and it's also helpful for the tribe itself to be proactive in searching out those opportunities, because we do have a lot of concerns and questions about climate change and ecological ramifications and other things. So that's sort of what we do in the Kavik Sukukun project, is just one of many examples of how we approach that.
Great.
Maybe Bobby will say a couple words.
There is a question here for Bobby that's come in from Sarah Betcher, who's the videographer, the filmmaker. Bobby, can you share how it was for you to be involved with this project? Did it change your thoughts at all about Arctic science, the approach of Arctic science? So Bobby, if you hear me, that's a question from Sarah Betcher.
Yeah, it did. It like I said, it gave me a different perspective. Sort of like putting on a new pair of glasses and seeing it from a little different way. I learned a lot from it, but I'm on ground zero, so we have a little different perspective than what the scientists see, because they come up here for a little bit and I live it, you know. And I'm ringside watching this crap happen. And, but my biggest fear has always been ocean acidification. It took me a while to understand it, but that's probably because we're ocean people, and a good part of our protein comes from the ocean. When the scientist tells you that it's happening at a rapid pace in the Arctic because of the cold water, but they won't tell you when the deadline or when the drop dead date is. You know, I'm talking about our animals and the fish that we rely on to survive. You know, because when they start talking and putting fear in you, because acidification is happening at such a rapid pace that carbon dioxide emissions will continue to increase because the world population is increasing by leaps and bounds. So services to that new bunch of people will be needed. More cars, more flights, more jet flights. And for God's sake, there's 50,000 flights a day in the United States alone. You know, and it's just amazing, and it's kind of mind-boggling as to I think the lack of education out there. And I see it, we see it, but with that amount of carbon dioxide going into the atmosphere, I mentioned that before about permafrost melting, with the dangerous stuff that's coming out of it. I think no one's looking at what's going to happen in the future. Where are we going to get our protein if in fact we can't get seals or whales or crab or all the other things that we get from the ocean, the salmon that we've been relying on up here for thousands of years. And I think that's something that maybe the tribe could look at. What are we going to do for protein once these animals start disappearing because their food that they normally have has always been there, and with acidification, the entire food chain will be upset. And so those are some of the questions that I think we have, and it's kind of a scary thought for us because we've always been in that. We've always done our hunting out there just like normal, and when something like this becomes a reality, it's kind of a scary thought. We've never put ourselves in a position to plan ahead as to how we're going to replace the proteins that we normally have from out there, and so it's just something I've been thinking about for quite a while, and
right.
It's a good old normal human way of saying, maybe if you close your eyes and turn away from it, it'll go away. But this is not going to go away. It's kind of a scary thought.
No. And one of the interesting things, maybe one of the scientists can offer a response on this, is that there's still deep uncertainty, even with all the science, even with all the satellites tracking the sea ice. Sort of short-term variability in the Arctic is still significant. So it's not like there's magical answers. And that idea of how do you maintain your food and what do you do about your energy supplies going forward as fossil fuels are no longer in the foreground. Big, important questions there. There are several questions coming in. I see some here that I'm going to try to get to. Kim Castens, wow, I haven't seen Kim in a long time. She says, thank you to all the panelists. You showed us a glimpse of the process by which local knowledge was used to frame questions to be addressed. Were there also instances in which local knowledge was used to formulate hypotheses or explanations that might not have emerged otherwise? This gets at something that I think it was Chris who alluded to this a little bit. So the idea that you had no mandate here, no existing hypothesis, has that borne fruit already? Has there been some torquing of an idea in a new direction?
I mean, I would say that's the cornerstone of the project, was that we formulated, and Andy pointed this out, we formulated our hypotheses directly from the beginning. We went in with a blank slate and developed these hypotheses with the direct knowledge of the Indigenous Council, Indigenous elders. And I don't know if you want to add to that, Andy.
Andy Mahoney.
Andy Mahoney, yeah.
Other Andy, that
Other
works
Andy.
too. Yeah, I think our research was based around questions that we would not have come up with as a group of scientists, even though they touch upon different aspects of all our particular expertises. I think wrapping them all up in one single question, that was definitely a result of working alongside our advisory council. And then we're also continuing that partnership as we analyze our results and write up those results. And so I think we're starting to make connections. Andy, you mentioned the short-term variations in sea ice that we're still scientifically having trouble predicting. Nobody predicted the dramatic lack of sea ice in 2018 and 2019, which were our two sort of main years for doing field work. So we didn't at that time know that was a question to ask. But as soon as it happened and we started asking, we combined the observations from Bobby's brother Ross, who was telling us that when he's out seal hunting down south of town, he's seen evidence that the ice is being melted from underneath somehow. And so in our second year of fieldwork, we decided we need a way to measure that heat. We need to work out where that heat's coming from. And that was Chris led the design. I see Carson is online as well here to deploy a mooring underneath the ice to ask questions that we didn't necessarily know to ask. So it was a very iterative process. Even though we started with our original questions, we added to those through the course of the project.
There's a really good question here from Emma Gomez. She says, this could be directed to anyone. I'm curious about how a research group would go about starting a relationship with the local community to collaborate on a project. In other words, how do you get this going? If you had one lesson for other groups working there or in other regions, what would be the sort of the first step? Is there someone who can pop in on that one?
I can maybe start out and try to let others chime in. This, I think, started at many different levels, this particular project. It was initially the Moore Foundation said, we want a project to look at this. We want to have a really strong community component. So that sort of created the drive. And then Chris, I think, came to me. Chris and I had worked together previously on a different project, not a community-related project. But I had already met Alex and started shooting around some ideas for doing sea ice work in Kotzebue. So I think a lot of threads all came together, and part of that was a meeting of the minds. People had already been thinking about some of these things together. But I would like to bring it back. It was Alex in the middle. Alex was the one, I think, who tied the knots of all those threads together and brought us all together as a team. So find your Alex is the answer to somebody who wants to try and follow this result from either end. If it's an indigenous community wanting to reach out to scientists, or if it's scientists wanting to do this sort of community-driven research.
That's very tweetable. I think
somebody like Alex on your team is really important.
Find your Alex. Alex Whiting, that must feel, I hope that feels good and not awkward, because it is an important, I think that is a key finding here. We can go a little bit longer. We have a few more minutes, and there are some other good questions coming in. One person has asked a question about journalism. Emma, also, I'd like to ask, how has journalism and science reporting changed over the years where indigenous communities have come more into focus? I will say very briefly that my change in my career after 35 years in journalism, the most profound part has been to realize how important it is to amplify or enable the voices of people on the ground. Most journalists still have this tendency, whether with a microphone or pad, to go into a community, interview a bunch of people, and basically tell the community its story back to it and the wider world. And I think that model is very flawed. When we can do much more, especially with technology now, as global connectivity spreads, to enable indigenous communities to tell their own stories to the world and to each other. In COVID-19 time, this is the importance of this has been amplified even more. And we've had several sessions here in my Earth Institute communication webcast about this very thing. What can we do to advance the visibility and voice of people on the ground? If Kevin, Uno, or anyone else has a question they want to foreground here that I can't keep track of in the list, that would be great.
Yeah, we have one from Daniel Ruiz. He says, I wanted to ask how easy or difficult it has been for the local communities to accept the use of high-tech devices or sensors to monitor environmental variables. As I think Andy mentioned earlier, there have been some issues in the tropical Andes, the Amazon, because of the use of technology on sacred lands. So probably one for Alex or Bobby.
Yeah.
Well, in our case, can you hear me?
Yep.
In our case, it's using sort of the latest and greatest technology is not novel, and part of our approach, as I explained earlier, is in fact doing just that, is bringing together sort of the groundbreaking technology along with the scientific know-how, with the depth of knowledge of the local people. And as long as the local people are involved with the effort from the beginning all the way through, then you can directly answer their concerns as you go along, whatever they may be, whether it relates to technology or approaches or whatnot. And so that's really where the co-production of knowledge comes in. That hand-in-hand cooperative approach allows any concerns of any sort to be addressed as the project moves along, and it becomes sort of a natural give and take, and as the relationship builds, it becomes easier and easier. So how you address that is by developing the true cooperative relationship from the beginning.
So there you go again, just the dialogue. Sustained engagement is the path to trust and efficacy at the same time. I think we're pretty much at the end here, but we're also just at the beginning. When I run my webcasts here at the Earth Institute, each one is always iterative, leading to more questions and opportunities than closure. So I hope this is the beginning of a sustained communication output relationship as well on this project as it goes through those next 6 chapters of the book and gets into the scientific literature and out into the wider world through the communication efforts, including those of Sarah Betcher, the great filmmaker. You were watching some of her video earlier. I'm going to ask if Ajit or Kevin or anyone, one of the leads, to close things out if you have any last thoughts. And I appreciate the opportunity to be involved with this to help facilitate this today.
Ajit, I don't know if you want to say anything about the project specifically, but I want to thank all the panel members and Andy for moderating, and Ajit for bringing this idea to us. This is something new for Colloquium, and we hope you liked it. I certainly enjoyed it, and we learned a lot along the way. And Alex and Bobby in particular, thank you for taking the time to join us today from far, far away.
Actually, you know what? There is one more question that's pretty good. If we could squeeze it in. Actually, Kim again says, kids, schools, was there any effort, have there been any efforts to involve local schools or children?
Go for it, Andy. Talk about your experience in the schools, Andy Mahoney.
Okay.
Yeah, I don't think I'm not the only team member. I think we actually all of us went into Kotzebue High School and Kotzebue Middle School on a number of occasions. But I do remember a really enjoyable time with the 6th graders there in Kotzebue. I brought a piece of ice in and put it in a tank to float, and we talked about how ice floats. And I'd actually sort of thought that middle schoolers from Kotzebue would be pretty unimpressed by somebody bringing a piece of ice into the classroom. They see it all the time, but actually it was a lot of fun. It generated a lot of excitement and interest, and I really enjoyed being part of that.
I imagine they like the drones too, if they've gotten to see them. Well, so anyway, that was an interruption of the finale here, and I don't want to. Kevin, I think you also had an announcement of some kind.
Oh, I put it in the chat. This is more of a Lamont community thing, but we're bringing back our post-colloquium social hour. So we invite everybody, panelists included, to join us at the link in the chat afterwards for a virtual TG. And it's not a Zoom meeting where you're looking at a brick wall of faces. It's much more intimate and fun. So if you can join us, please do.
And that's in the chat somewhere there. Oh, I think I see it.
And Ajit, did you want to close with anything?
No, just to say that all are invited, including the folks from Moore, and I also see some folks from NSF, so please do join us.
And I'm a big fan of that new platform that after party will be on, OEA. It's I brought it to Columbia and it's spreading like a virus, so check it out. So anyway, thank you all for having me involved today, and please get in touch through various means with this team to explore next steps. I plan to have a webcast or two to follow up on this. Thank you again.